I can still hear the hollow clatter as my body hit the ground, the air tearing out of my lungs, and the sky spinning above me. That fall could have ended everything, but instead, it bought me the minutes I didn't know I needed. Minutes that kept me breathing when someone I trusted wanted me gone. It was our third wedding anniversary, and though we weren't going anywhere fancy, we wanted it to feel special. I'd already uncorked a bottle of wine, and a cake from Claire's favorite bakery sat waiting in the fridge. I remember thinking it was exactly the kind of quiet, simple celebration I loved. Then the knock came. 3 short raps, not loud, not impatient, just unexpected. Claire and I exchanged a glance. I opened the door to find my older brother Ryan standing there, smiling like we'd spoken just yesterday instead of months ago. He wore a leather jacket, jeans, and a grin I didn't quite trust. In one hand, he held a glossy white box tied with a gold ribbon. In the other, a bottle of whiskey so expensive that I knew he hadn't bought it for himself. "Happy anniversary, little brother," he said, stepping forward before I could invite him in. "Ryan." I tried to keep the surprise out of my voice. "What are you?" "Thought I'd drop by, make a toast to family," he cut in smoothly, already shrugging off his jacket. "Can't believe it's been 3 years. Time flies." Claire came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Ryan, hi," she said, polite but clearly taken aback. "And here's where I need to explain something. Claire used to date Ryan. 2 years, give or take. They'd been on and off for a while, and she ended things for good after deciding she couldn't see a future with him. A few months later, by pure chance, she and I ran into each other at a coffee shop. We reconnected, things clicked, and within a year we were engaged. Ryan didn't take it well. There were no screaming matches, no outright threats, just a steady pulling away. Cold shoulders at family gatherings. The occasional snide comment. I'd made peace with the idea that we might never be close again. Which is why his showing up with expensive gifts and an easy smile set every instinct I had on edge. "Brought you something special," he said, setting the whiskey and sweets on the table. "Imported truffles. Had them once on a trip overseas. Figured you should try the good stuff." "Thanks," I said, still trying to read his tone. He clapped his hands lightly. "Well, let's try them now." Claire hesitated. "We were just about to have dinner." "Dessert before dinner. Just this once?" Ryan said, already untying the ribbon on the box. "Anniversary rules." I felt a flash of irritation. It was our evening, our celebration, but Ryan's gaze was locked on us like he was waiting to see what we'd do. Claire gave a small shrug. "Okay, just one." The chocolates were rich, decadent, and dusted with cocoa powder that clung to my fingertips. The whiskey was smooth enough to burn just a little going down. Ryan kept the conversation light. Stories from work, a bit about a car he was fixing up, even a joke or two at his own expense. For a moment, I wondered if I'd been wrong about him holding a grudge. Half an hour passed before he finally stood, grabbing his jacket. "Well, I'll let you two get back to your night," he said. "Glad I could stop by." I walked him to the door. "Thanks for coming," I said, and I meant it, or at least part of me did. He paused on the porch. "Gotta stick together, right? Family's all we've got." He patted my shoulder and headed to his truck. I stood there for a moment, watching his taillights disappear down the street. Inside, Claire was clearing the glasses from the table. "Maybe he's finally letting it go," she said, not sounding entirely convinced. "Maybe," I echoed, though the words didn't settle right in my chest. The rest of the evening slid back into normal dinner, wine, a movie. But in the back of my mind, I kept replaying the image of Ryan pushing that box of sweets across the table, his eyes never quite matching his smile. I told myself it was nothing, just an awkward attempt at reconnecting. After all, it was our anniversary. The last thing I wanted was to think there was anything wrong. I didn't know then that the chocolates and whiskey were the first step in a plan that could have ended both our lives. And I didn't know that a battered old ladder sitting in the shed would be the reason I lived to tell it. The evening had settled into that warm, contented lull after a good meal. The plates were rinsed, the last of the wine was breathing in the glass, and Claire had disappeared into the kitchen to wrap up leftovers. I stepped out onto the back porch, the cool air brushing my skin, and noticed it right away. A section of the gutter hanging at an angle above the shed. It wasn't urgent, but the way it sagged made me think about the forecast for rain later in the week. I figured it would take 5 minutes to tighten. No need to make a big deal about it. I headed for the shed, the wooden floor creaking under my steps, and pulled out the old aluminum ladder. It was one of those hand-me-downs from my dad. Dented in 2 places, flecks of dried paint along the rails, 1 rubber foot missing. I'd used it 100 times without thinking twice. The grass was damp from the afternoon watering as I propped the ladder against the side of the house. A breeze rattled the leaves above me. I climbed, my hands gripping the cold metal, the squeak of each rung loud in the quiet. Halfway up, the world shifted. It started as a gentle sway in my vision, like the house was rocking on its foundation. My stomach tightened, the air felt heavier. I blinked hard, trying to clear it, but the haze only thickened. "Come on, focus," I muttered under my breath. I reached for the next rung and missed. My grip slipped. The ladder jolted under me. Suddenly, I was weightless. The fall was fast but somehow slow, my body twisting as the yard and sky traded places. The impact slammed the air from my lungs, a deep thud that left me gasping like a fish on a dock. Pain shot through my ribs, sharp and deep. For a moment, all I could do was stare up at the sky, my ears filled with the faint ringing that follows a hard hit. I rolled to my side, clutching my ribs. My mind was sluggish, but one thought pushed through. "Claire. Claire." My voice was hoarse, but I called again. No answer. I staggered to my feet, my legs unsteady beneath me, and limped toward the back door. Every breath hurt, each step sending a dull throb up my side. Inside, the house felt wrong. Too still. The faint music from earlier was gone, and the smell of dinner had cooled into something flat. "Claire." I called again, louder this time. That's when I saw her. She was on the kitchen floor, her body turned slightly on her side, one arm bent awkwardly beneath her. Her eyes were closed, lips pale. The dish towel she'd been holding earlier lay a few feet away, crumpled. "Claire." I dropped to my knees beside her, ignoring the flare of pain in my ribs. I touched her shoulder, gave it a gentle shake. No reaction. Panic tore through me. My first thought was to grab my phone, but my hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. I managed to hit the emergency number, blurting out our address and that my wife wasn't breathing right. The dispatcher's voice was calm, asking me to check for a pulse. I pressed my fingers to the side of her neck. Faint but there. Relief hit me so hard it nearly made me dizzy all over again. "She's got a pulse, it's weak," I told them. "Stay with her, help is on the way," the voice on the other end said. The next few minutes blurred. I sat beside Claire, keeping my hand on hers, fighting to stay upright myself. The dizziness was still there, curling in the edges of my vision like smoke. My head felt thick, like I downed an entire bottle of that whiskey instead of a few sips. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the wail of sirens growing closer. Then, red and blue lights splashed against the windows. 2 paramedics rushed in. One knelt by Claire, checking her vitals, while the other turned to me. "Sir, you don't look good either," she said. My voice faltered. I fell off the ladder. But I think that's all I managed before the room tilted again. The paramedic caught my arm, guiding me into a chair. She asked if I'd eaten or drunk anything unusual, and through the fog in my brain, my mind flashed to the truffles and whiskey. "We both had chocolates," I mumbled, "and some whiskey. My brother brought them over." Her eyes flicked toward her partner, and something unspoken passed between them. Within minutes, Claire and I were both on stretchers, wheeled into the back of the ambulance. I remember the cold rush of the oxygen mask, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor, and the metallic taste in my mouth. And then, just as the doors closed, a strange thought cut through the haze. If I hadn't been on that ladder, we'd still be in the house. I woke to a harsh white light above me, so bright it felt like it had burned straight through my eyelids. For a second, I didn't know where I was. The sterile smell, the low hum of machines, the faint beep 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 somewhere near my head. I blinked hard. My throat was dry, and my tongue felt like sandpaper. When I turned my head, pain flared in my ribs, reminding me of the fall. "You're awake." I looked toward the voice. A tall man in a navy blue paramedic jacket leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His name tag read Josh. "You gave us a scare," he said. pushing off the wall. When we got to your house, your wife was on the kitchen floor. You were sitting against the counter out cold. If you hadn't called when you did, I'm not sure. He trailed off, shaking his head. Bits of memory surfaced. The dizzy climb, the fall, the empty silence. Claire on the floor. Is she? My voice cracked. Claire. Where is she? She's here, Josh said quickly. In the next room. Stable. Still unconscious when we brought her in, but her vitals were holding. You'll see her soon. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. The questions in my head were already stacking up. Before I could ask them, the door swung open and a woman in a white coat stepped in. She was small, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. I'm Dr. Patel, she said, checking the monitor beside me. How are you feeling? Like my head's full of wet cement, I muttered. That's not surprising, she said, glancing at a chart. Your blood work came back. We found a high concentration of zolpidem in your system. It's a sedative prescription strength. Strong enough to cause loss of coordination, dizziness, and unconsciousness in the doses you and your wife ingested. Her words hit like a bucket of ice water. Sedative? You think someone... She cut in gently. It's not something you accidentally pick up from food or drink unless it was put there. I lay back against the pillow, my pulse hammering in my ears. I replayed the day in my head, the breakfast Claire made, the lunch I grabbed from the fridge, the dinner we just finished. And then Ryan, standing in the doorway with that box of chocolates and the bottle of whiskey, smiling like he belonged there. The taste of the truffles came back to me, the faint warmth of the whiskey. My stomach turned. The only unusual thing we had today was from my brother, I said slowly. Sweets and a drink. He brought them over this afternoon. Dr. Patel's expression didn't change, but she made a note on her clipboard. Was there a reason he might want to harm you? She asked. I hesitated, thinking about the years since Claire left him. The stilted family gatherings. The short, clipped phone calls. The way he barely looked at me whenever we were in the same room. Yeah, I said finally. There's a reason. A knock at the door broke the moment. A man in a brown suit stepped in, flashing a badge. Officer Lewis. His hair was thinning, his face lined, but his eyes were sharp and direct. Mr. Walker, he said, pulling a small notebook from his jacket. Mind if I ask you a few questions? I nodded and he moved closer. Anyone besides you and your wife home today? No, just us. Until my brother came over around 4. And how long did he stay? Half an hour, maybe less. He gave us chocolates and whiskey. Said he wanted to celebrate our anniversary. Lewis's pen scratched across the page. Any history of bad blood? I gave a humorless laugh. You could say that. Claire used to date him. Didn't end well. He stopped writing for a moment, looking up at me. How long ago was that? 3 years before we got married. He nodded slowly, then flipped to a fresh page. All right, now, I need to tell you something. While you were both here in the ER, your house caught fire. The words didn't register at first. What? The fire department was dispatched around 8 p.m. Neighbors reported heavy smoke coming from the living room window. By the time they got there, the interior was already engulfed. The structure's standing, but the damage is extensive. I just stared at him. The image of our living room. The couch, the framed wedding photos, the shelf of books Claire loved, flickered in my mind, overlaid with orange flames and choking smoke. Do you know what caused it? I asked. They're still investigating, Lewis said. But there's something else. One of your neighbors has a security camera that faces your driveway. It picked up a man walking toward your back door less than an hour after the ambulance took you away. We're reviewing the footage now. The room felt colder. My grip on the blanket tightened. I didn't have to ask who they thought it was. Do you have somewhere you can stay tonight? Lewis asked. I nodded numbly, but my mind was already back at the kitchen table. The sweets between us, Ryan watching as we ate. The sedative had been meant to keep us under. The fire was meant to make sure we never woke up. And suddenly, the fall from the ladder didn't feel like the worst thing that happened to me that day. 2 days later, the world still smelled like smoke. Claire and I sat side by side in a small interview room at the precinct, our hands wrapped around paper cups of coffee we weren't drinking. The walls were a tired off-white, the kind of color you paint when you don't want to commit to anything. Through the glass, I could see a bullpen of desks, the shuffle of paperwork, a copier rattling as if it had a cough. Claire's sleeve brushed mine each time she shifted. The contact was small, but it tethered me to the moment. Officer Lewis came in with a folder under his arm and a frank look that told me he wasn't here to pad anything with soft words. He sat, set the folder down, and folded his hands on top of it. "Thanks for coming in," he said. "I know the last 48 hours have been a lot." Claire gave a brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. I just nodded. Lewis flipped the folder open. "I'll start with the fire. The investigators finished their preliminary report this morning. It was arson. Accelerant patterns were found along the living room floor and under the windowsill. The point of origin was the area by your couch. Likely a pour in light. The room tilted just slightly, like my brain couldn't decide if it wanted to picture our living room as it had been. Throw blanket, candle on the coffee table, a stack of mail, or as a blackened shell wearing the shape of our life. I felt my jaw clench. Claire's fingers found my forearm and rested there. Lewis continued, voice even. "A gas can was recovered from behind your shed. Gloves were left in the grass a few feet away. We pulled prints." He paused, not for effect, but to choose words that wouldn't light a fuse. "They match your brother," he said. I stared at him. I'd been preparing for it, and still it hit like a punch square to the sternum. "Ryan," I said, testing the sound of his name in this new context. "A suspect, not a brother." "You're sure?" "Multiple points of comparison," Lewis said. "Thumb and index on the handle of the can. Partial prints on one of the gloves. We also have exterior camera footage I want to show you." He turned the folder so we could see the printouts clipped inside. Grainy stills from a neighbor's driveway cam. Headlights eased to a stop at the end of our block. The unmistakable outline of Ryan's truck. Another still. A figure moving along the side fence toward our backyard. Hood up, shoulders hunched against the night. "Time stamps?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would make my stomach twist. 8:47 p.m., Lewis said. "Roughly an hour after you and your wife were transported." Claire's grip tightened on my arm. "He knew," she said, voice thin. "He waited until we were gone. Or until he thought you were both out," Lewis said gently. "We can't know what he assumed about your condition, only that you weren't at home to stop anything. The accelerant pattern suggests an intent to make sure the fire moved fast." I was quiet a long moment. Then my mouth said the thing my brain had been circling. "He drugged us first. He brought the chocolates and whiskey to make sure we were under. If I hadn't fallen off the ladder..." I stopped there, breath catching on the thought. "He wanted it clean. No struggle. Just a tragedy." Lewis didn't contradict me. Claire let go of my arm and folded her hands in her lap. Fingertips laced so tightly the knuckles blanched. "He came into our house," she said, and there was a tremor of disbelief that made my chest ache. "On our anniversary." He smiled at me. "He made a toast. He planned it like a celebration," I said, because saying it plain helped me believe I hadn't imagined that look in Ryan's eyes when we lifted our glasses. Not warmth. Not forgiveness. Calculation. Lewis slid another printout across the table. A close-up of the gas can handle with black powder dusted across it, the whorls of a thumbprint clear as a map. "We're drafting a warrant," he said. "We'll pick him up as soon as the judge signs." "Does he know you're onto him?" I asked. "Not yet," Lewis said. "We contacted him for a basic statement the night of the fire routine when we're building a timeline. He said he stopped by earlier in the day to drop off a gift and left within 30 minutes. He volunteered that he was trying to make peace. He didn't mention what the gift was." "Of course he didn't," I muttered. Lewis leaned back, assessing us for a beat before speaking again. "I want to be thorough. People do dangerous things when emotions are high, but this was a patient. Calculated. Took steps. We're going to ask you some questions that may feel intrusive. It helps us make the case airtight." He started with Claire. "Any comments from Ryan in the last year you remember? Anything that felt off?" Claire stared at the tabletop, then up at the corners of the room like she was trying to pull memories from the paint. "He cornered me at a family barbecue last summer," she said slowly. "You were inside getting a cooler, Mike. He said, you're playing house with a man who stole mine." I told him that wasn't fair. He smiled and said, "What's yours should have been mine." Lewis wrote as she spoke. "Anything else?" Claire's mouth pressed thin. "Christmas 2 years ago. He brought a gift for our place. A framed photo of the lake where we used to go when we were dating. He made a point of telling Mike it was part of our story. Like a reminder. I asked him to leave. He stood in the doorway and said, 'This isn't over.' I thought he meant the argument. I didn't think he meant." Her voice trailed off. I took her hand. Lewis turned to me. "You, little things," I said. He'd show up to my job site and act like he just happened to be in the area. Ask about money. Ask how the house was coming. Once, when we were putting up shelves, he said, "Careful on that ladder. Be a shame if you took a spill." I grimaced. I thought it was a joke. Guys say dumb things around tools all the time. Lewis's pen slowed, then stopped. He met my eyes. The more context we have, the harder it is for him to spin this as an accident or a misunderstanding. He stood, gathered the photos, and then paused. "There's one more thing. Your neighbor, Janet? She's the one with the driveway camera. She also mentioned seeing headlights wash across your living room windows around the time the fire started. That suggests whoever said it wanted to see the fire catch before leaving. It shows intent to ensure the outcome." A new kind of anger rose in me, low and steady, like heat building under a pan. Not the white-hot flash I'd felt when I saw Claire on the kitchen floor. This was something colder. A line is being drawn. "When you arrest him," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised me, "I don't want a call asking me to be merciful. I don't want to sit down about family. I want you to do your job and keep him away from us." Lewis nodded. "That's the plan." He left us a few minutes after, promising updates. When the door clicked shut, the silence felt heavier than it had before. Claire released a breath she'd been holding. "I keep replaying the moment he pushed the box toward us," she said. "You know how you can tell when someone really wants something? His eyes. They were everywhere, but they kept landing on those chocolates." "I saw it," I said. "I told myself it was because he'd spent money, and he wanted the gesture to land." "I dated him," she whispered, as if the words were a confession. "I knew he could be petty, sulk for days if he felt slighted. But this..." She shook her head slowly, like she could undo what had already been done. "I never imagined this." A knock. The door opened a few inches, and Janet, our neighbor, peered in. She'd asked to swing by the station after she learned we were there. Said she wanted to tell us in person she was sorry she hadn't noticed more sooner. Lewis allowed it, with the door cracked and a detective hovering just outside. Janet stepped in with a gentle, nervous smile. "I didn't want to bother you at home," she said, then caught herself. "I mean, if you had a home." "I'm sorry. That sounded awful." "It's okay," I said, and meant it. Nothing sounded normal in this new vocabulary. "I saw his truck," she went on, voice gaining strength as she moved to the part she'd come to say. "I thought it was strange because he'd left earlier in the day. And then I saw a light flicker. I told myself it was your TV. I wish I'd called." "You filmed what you saw?" Claire said softly. "That's the reason anyone will believe us faster." "Thank you." Janet's eyes filled. "I always liked your roses," she said to Claire. "The way you keep that little strip by the steps neat. I'm going to bring you cuttings when you're settled somewhere else." After she left, Claire leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat that way until Lewis returned with a final update. The warrant was signed. Units were already en route to pick up Ryan. Walking out through the bullpen, the world felt too bright, too loud. Phones ringing, shoes squeaking, cases stacked on metal carts. Outside, the sky was a hard blue etched with high, thin clouds. We stood on the steps a moment, side by side, looking at nothing. "He meant it," Claire said. "When he said what's yours should have been mine." "Yeah," I said. "And when he couldn't have it, he decided no one would." As we crossed the lot, I glanced at my hands. 2 days earlier, they'd slipped on a rung slick with my own dizziness. The ladder had dropped me hard. But that fall had pulled me out of the house, out of the worst possible version of the night. It had bought me breath. I didn't know what our next home would look like. I didn't know how many nights I'd wake to phantom sirens or the memory of the kitchen floor, empty of sound. I only knew this. A plan meant to leave us silent had failed, and the man who wrote it was about to run out of words. The holding area at the precinct was quieter than I expected. No slammed doors, no shouting. Just the low murmur of voices down the hall and the occasional clink of a coffee cup against a desk. I sat in a plastic chair beside Claire, my foot tapping without rhythm, as Officer Lewis briefed us. "He's coming in voluntarily," Lewis said. "We told him we needed a follow-up statement for the fire investigation. He thinks he's here to help us close the loop." I almost laughed at the phrase, but my throat was too tight. Claire kept her eyes on the floor. "Will we see him?" she asked. "Not unless you want to," Lewis replied. "You'll be in the conference room. We'll talk to him in interview too." He paused. "Once we confront him with the evidence, it'll move fast." Through the glass wall, I watched as Ryan walked in from the lobby. He looked exactly as he had 2 days earlier. Pressed shirt, clean shave, that easy smirk he'd always worn like armor. He shook an officer's hand as if he belonged there. They led him to the interview room. I couldn't hear at first, just see his posture. Leaning back, ankle resting on his knee, casual. Then the audio feed crackled to life. Lewis started simple. "We just need you to walk us through the evening again. What time you arrived, what you brought when you left." Ryan's voice came smoothly, practiced. "Got there around 4. Box of Belgian chocolates, bottle of whiskey. Stayed maybe 30 minutes. We had a drink, talked a bit. I left." "Did you go back later that night?" Lewis asked. Ryan chuckled. "No. Why would I?" "That's what we're trying to determine," Lewis said evenly. "We have a gas can found on the property. Your fingerprints are on it. We also have security footage of your truck near the house at 8:47 p.m. There was a pause, a tiny hitch in the air, like a string being pulled tight. "That's impossible," Ryan said, but the warmth had drained from his tone. "Anyone could have." "Not anyone with your exact fingerprints," Lewis cut in. "Not anyone wearing gloves with your partial prints inside them." Ryan leaned forward now, elbows on the table. "You think I tried to burn my own brother's house down?" "I don't think," Lewis said. "I have evidence." And then it happened, the shift. The mask cracked, and something hard and bitter slid out in his voice. "You stole her," Ryan said. Lewis didn't respond, just let the words hang. "You think I forgot how it happened?" Ryan continued, his gaze flicking toward the mirrored wall. "She was with me first. 2 years. Then you show up and suddenly she's planning a life with you. You didn't earn that. You took it." Lewis spoke before I could push my chair back and burst into that room. "This isn't about a breakup," he said. "This is about attempted murder and arson. Do you deny drugging them?" Ryan's lip curled. "Maybe I wanted you to feel what it's like when everything you built gets ripped away. That's not murder. That's balance." Lewis didn't blink. "Ryan Collins, you're under arrest for 2 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of arson." The scrape of a chair, the snap of handcuffs. Ryan didn't fight, but his eyes burned through the glass, searching for me. For a second, I thought he might lunge, but the officers held him steady. As they walked him out, he twisted his head toward the mirror. "You don't get to keep her forever," he said, like it was a promise. The door shut and the feed cut. Lewis came back to the conference room. "It's done," he said simply. Claire stood slowly, her hands shaking, but her voice steady. "I don't want to know where they take him. I just want him gone." Lewis nodded. "You won't have to see him again unless it's in court. We'll keep you posted." We walked out of the station into the late afternoon light. The world outside looked exactly the same as it had when we walked in. Cars passing, pigeons pecking at crumbs, the faint smell of exhaust in the air. But everything inside me felt heavier, rearranged. Claire slid her hand into mine, and we didn't speak the whole way to the car. The shock was still settling in, each breath feeling like it had to push past the weight of what had almost happened. When we reached the lot, she finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "It's over, right?" I squeezed her hand. "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it yet. "It's over." The backyard of the rental house was nothing like the one we'd lost. No garden beds, no weathered fence we'd painted together, no creaking oak to shade the summer afternoons. Just patchy grass, a tin shed, and the ladder leaning against it like it had been waiting for me. The fire department had salvaged it weeks ago, charred in places, the aluminum frame warped from heat. One of the firefighters had told me, almost casually, "Funny thing, this ladder wasn't anywhere near the flames. Looked like it had been left out in the yard." I just nodded, unable to explain what it meant to me then. Now, standing over it, I understood perfectly. That ladder was the line between what happened and what could have happened. If I hadn't climbed it that evening, I'd have been in the house when the sedatives fully hit me. I'd have been on that kitchen floor with Claire, unconscious, when the fire took hold. Claire came out with 2 mugs of coffee, her hair pulled back, sweater sleeves covering her hands. She set 1 mug on the shed's ledge and followed my gaze to the ladder. "I still can't believe we made it out," she said quietly. "Some nights, I think about it, and my chest feels tight all over again." I nodded. "I keep running it through my head. How everything had to line up just right or wrong for it to play out like that." She sipped her coffee, eyes distant. "I always knew Ryan resented us. I saw it in little ways. The way he'd look at me at family dinners or how he'd joke about you getting lucky. But I never thought," she trailed off, shaking her head, "that he'd try to kill us?" I finished for her. Her silence was answer enough. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Officer Lewis's name lit the screen. "Hey, officer," I answered, stepping a few paces away. "Just wanted to update you," he said. "Ryan's bail hearing was this morning. The judge denied it. He's staying in custody until trial. That should give you both some peace of mind." "Yeah," I said, though peace still felt like a long way off. "Thanks for letting me know." When I hung up, Claire was still looking at the ladder. "Bail denied," I told her. She let out a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Good." I crouched down and ran my hand along the metal side rail. The scorch marks were dark and jagged, cutting through the dull silver. It smelled faintly of smoke still, even after weeks in storage. Most people would toss something like this, a damaged tool with no safe use left in it. But I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. I carried it to the side of the shed and set it upright against the wall. Not to climb, never again, but to remind me of what it had done, what it had saved me from. Claire stepped closer, resting her hand lightly on my arm. "You're keeping it?" "Yeah," I said. "Not as a keepsake. More like a warning." Her brow furrowed. "A warning about what?" "That sometimes, the thing that almost kills you is the same thing that gives you another shot." She looked at the ladder again, then at me. "I guess that makes sense." We stood there for a while, the late afternoon light cutting long shadows across the grass. The world had moved on. Neighbors in the next yard chatting over their fence, a dog barking somewhere down the street. But for me, part of it was still frozen on that day. The day a ladder dropped me into pain and confusion, and pulled me out of a fire I didn't even know was coming. It would stay there against the shed, weathering in the rain and sun. Not a tool anymore, but a silent witness to the night everything nearly ended. What would you have done if your own family tried to wipe you out like this? Do you think my fall from the ladder was pure luck, or something else? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you like jaw-dropping betrayal stories, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one.